I would like to welcome everybody to today's lunch talk. Today we have a guest from Canada. It's actually pretty early in the morning for him. Christian Painchaud. He's working for a company called Audette, and the topic will be the hard costs of building decarbonization, which is right, I would say, in the heart of what we're interested in, of course, in Sweet DeCarbCH. So, Christian, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Gianfranco, and thank you, Frédéric, for inviting me to the lunch talk. Really appreciate. I'll try to make that interesting and fun. So I'll start by talking a little bit about how I got to working at Audette, and I'll explain a little bit the topic of my presentation. Around the end of the presentation, I'll bridge the things that we've seen with what is Audette and why I think that what we do is interesting and valuable. And after that, I hope that it's gonna help you because when I created the presentation, I looked at the different YouTube videos and I saw a lot of presentations about technologies that help decarbonize buildings and things like that. And I want to make a bridge between the people consuming those technologies and the technologies themselves. But first, like a few words where I'm coming from. So I started my career out of school in finance, but I built two software companies with a vision for a sustainable future. One was about mass customization. So it's basically reducing mass production and overconsumption. And the other one was a sustainable e-commerce company around sportswear, where I tried to make a 100% local sports apparel company. Everything was made in Montreal. I tried to really minimize the carbon footprint and prove that it's possible. Then I moved on and I switched into software again, but into smart grids. So I joined a small startup in Montreal and where I learned a lot about energy, smart grids, the utilities ecosystem, the impact of EV cars, of rooftop solar and distributed energy resources, community energy plans, and decarbonization at large. So it was basically an attempt at creating Audette before Audette. And next but that didn't work out. So next I discovered AI technologies in an AI chatbot company. So that was back a little bit to my e-commerce roots. But I was working there. It's a company called Heyday that was acquired by Hootsuite. And it's really where I discovered what the things that can be done with AI and big data models and how how the AI performance is dependent on the quality of data that it ingests. Now I'm working on automated decarbonization planning at Audette.io. The company is Canadian. It's based in Victoria in British Columbia. But it's a digital company, so we have just a very small office in Victoria, but I'm based in Montreal, Canada. Our core technology at Audette is energy modeling, and I'll talk a little bit later about why it's important and how it's helping decarbonization planning. All right, so let's get to the problem. So every year we see that there are some ambitious decarbonization targets announced, and every year we see that those targets are missed. It's true in every sector, and it's true in the real estate sector, the commercial real estate sector, and we're wondering why that happens. And we're wondering then how can we help those people achieve their targets. So at Audette, we're really trying to enable commercial real estate managers to deploy capital effectively. And we leverage energy modeling to power decarbonization planning. So basically, we want to make sure that the money buys the green technologies. So here's what it looks like. So we're wondering, why is there so much friction in the market to connect green technologies and building owners? And in my presentation, I have a strong like a perspective that is really focused on North America. We haven't deployed Audette to Europe yet. So it's from the perspective of like North American investors in commercial real estate. For the presentation, I assume that it's similar in Europe. If it's not, we can discuss about it at the end of the presentation. But basically, yes. So how do we bridge the gap between the green technologies? They're out there, they exist, they're known for the most part. But then why is it so hard to connect the green tech with the buildings? So to understand that, we'll start by looking at how those asset managers make money. So they go in the market and they collect money from investors that they place in a fund. And that fund will need to have a financial performance, and eventually it's going to return the money to the investors. When there's money in the fund, the asset managers, they use that to purchase assets, and the assets are properties, commercial real estate properties, and each of those properties are made of buildings. Why is it important to make a distinction between properties and buildings? Is because a property could be a multifamily campus or a commercial campus with several buildings on it. And from an energy modeling perspective, we care about the building, like it's an envelope that is separated, that has its own HVAC system. So we make that distinction, and it's important for any decarbonization effort to understand that the properties or the buildings are not just basically assets aligned in a spreadsheet. Okay, so I'm saying this because the real estate sector is massive. It's trillions of dollars. It's huge. The asset managers are big companies. You can think of BlackRock. You can think of Prudential. It's quite a concentrated business. And they have tiny sustainability teams. Okay, it's not something that had been their priority, but it's a growing concern and a growing priority. But they still have very small sustainability teams inside of their organizations. They're also facing new kinds of challenges and even threats. So yes, globally they account for around 20% of GHG emissions, but yet most of them don't really know how to minimize their carbon footprint. And the result is that on the medium term, they're about to face higher operation costs because regulators at the city level or even at the country level introduce new carbon taxes and other kind of energy performance regulations. And that is starting to be very concerning for the different asset managers. For example, last year or this year in New York City, there's a new law that kicked into action that's called LL 97. And that now a lot of buildings in New York City are exposed to millions of dollars of fines. It's not like a carbon tax. It's like a carbon tax, but it's more like a municipal fine for poor energy performance. Or there's also indications that energy costs will rise sharply in the next decade or so. And it creates higher operation costs for the building owners. They all are also exposed on the other side of it to lower revenue. A typical example is, for example, you have a lot of warehouses and you lease them to a company, but then that company wanna decarbonize its supply chain. Now, as the building owner of the warehouse in their supply chain, you're being asked, okay, but now you're part of my problem to decarbonize. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to decarbonize your building? And if you can't do it, then I'm going to start shopping for new warehouses that are greener so that I can decarbonize my supply chain. So it makes the leasability of the buildings go down, and that's bad. So the asset managers again face growing stranding risks where they end up being unable to sell brown warehouses or any other kind of buildings back into the market because the market will say, well, if I buy this, am I going to be able to rent it? And the operation costs are super high. They are exposed to a lot of carbon fines. So this is context around who are the asset managers and how they operate. And I'm saying all this so that we can place context on this slide, which is the annual capital planning process. Okay, so inside the asset manager, so the company, again, like something like Prudential or BlackRock, they have a large finance team. So they are the people managing the money. They have the power, they have the money, all right? And they will be working with their operations team. So the operations team will be lots of engineers and building folks that are responsible for making sure that the buildings are working properly and that they are maintained and that they are collecting rents and everything and all that. And in the middle or as part of the operations or somewhere in there, there's a very, very small sustainability team that tries to get ahead, but that is always kind of late to the conversation and who wants to be part of the conversation. And just to make that even more simple, there is sometimes the operations team will hire property managers, outsourcing the effective management of the buildings to third-party companies that are also massive companies. And these persons are basically the ones that know the buildings. Because as I said, I'll go back a few slides, but as I said here, the building is in fact for the finance team an abstraction. It's a money abstraction on a spreadsheet. It's one line on a spreadsheet. So they don't know a lot about the buildings, the physical buildings themselves. That knowledge is kind of trapped in the property manager's silos and a little bit in the operations team. But the finance team, what they see are spreadsheets and business cases, and they decide if they want to allocate money to business case A or business case B. And capital planning happens once or twice a year, and it's usually for periods of 1, 2, 3, 5 years. So it really depends on the teams and the business internal processes and standards. But it's important to know that because if you know that, you understand the kind of the purchasing processes of those organizations. All right. So, and it's important to realize that the property managers and the finance team and the operations team, they are very busy and they are risk averse by the definition of their jobs. What they want to, the thing that they care about is to make sure that their building's value is growing, is that their asset portfolio value is growing, and that they will be able to distribute returns on the money of their investors. All right. So this process is very, very important, and it is where you have to insert the new technologies. And inserting new technologies in this process is not simple. First of all, because but for different reasons, actually, I have a slide about that later around the challenges of decarbonization. But again, there's a lot of people in there that are risk averse. And it's an annual process where information is trapped in different silos. And here's an example of what we hear, okay? It's a big part of it is a data problem. And we have senior vice presidents and head of ESG that are saying things like, we've been doing sustainability reporting for over 10 years, and we're still only at 50% data coverage of our assets. Here, data coverage means a clear picture of the energy consumption of their buildings. It means a clear picture of the equipment list of the buildings. It means a clear picture of the general building performance. And it is important. It is also showing that it's very painful for them. They say they're desperate. They don't know what to do, how to identify most commonly recommended carbon reduction measures. Here you see they're looking for the standards. They're not looking for any like world-changing innovations. They want to know, okay, what is the most basic decarbonization thing that everyone is doing? Because I want to do it by asset class. So if I have a lot of offices or multifamily buildings, then we want to do what everybody else is doing. And we want to deploy it at scale, which is another part of the problem. So let's say you know nothing or very little about half of your portfolio. How can you actually deploy something like a new technology or even a standard technology, but just deploy the capital to make sure that to make it happen at the scale of your portfolio? Okay. And recently, we've been hearing a lot. Our CEO goes to different conferences about real estate in North America. So recently, something that has come up very loud and clear is exposure to buildings performance standard fines now is very concerning and a topic that will be front and center in the next few years. And they don't actually know the level of exposure that they have. Which brings us to Audette. So Audette is an online software that allows the asset managers to basically import an address list. And with big data and AI combined with energy modeling, we're able to give a first picture, like let's say a low resolution first picture at scale of a building's portfolio performance. So now you have sort of a directional idea of where is your portfolio's below standards or above standards in terms of energy efficiency, or let's say energy intensity and carbon emission intensity. And we also have estimations about energy costs and things like that. So that creates a conversation starter for the sustainability team. And that's also creating a framework for them to start creating a strategy at the scale of their portfolio to decarbonize. The next thing that Audette offers, our modeling engine, it offers the ability. It's a feature we're releasing soon, but we're working on. First of all, we do automated recommendations. So on top of the energy modeling, we baked into our software the knowledge of our building science team, and based on different criterias, and those criterias mostly will be the replacement year of the HVAC systems that we believe are in those buildings. Then we will offer like a first set of projects, recommended projects. Soon we will offer the ability to customize those projects, because the first list of recommended projects may not be totally accurate because we don't know a lot about the building at that stage. We also enable our users to add more information about the equipment list, for example, what is inside the building. So this way, when they update the equipment list, it will update the energy and emission profile of the building, and it will update the recommendations that are made. And on top of that, the users can also add energy information, and then we're going to be able to adjust the consumption by end use, so that we're improving the business case for each of the project, having like a better idea of what are the different returns on investment. And this way, now someone like the vice president of ESG's team, and like maybe they had a couple analysts on the team, now they have the ability to be proactive in the capital planning conversations, because there are a few phone calls away from the operations team and the property managers, and they can update this sheet and now identify opportunities. Okay, so just quick recap. Audette is iterative and outside in. Okay, so we start at scale with low resolution, but then it enables to build up strategy and direction, and with low cost energy and emissions modeling, right? But then as you're building up your understanding of the problem, you can deploy resources where needed, especially in data acquisition efforts, because that's a problem we've seen at our customers' organization, is that, oh, we have this like 5-year project where we're trying to collect data for our buildings. But then, okay, where are you in your project? Where we're kind of halfway there. They've been working on it for 5-10 years. So that doesn't work, right? So they have to be smarter about where they really want the data. So they probably really want that data on the buildings that they care the most about. And why they care the most about certain buildings, we can inform them about this, but they also have their own list of priorities and competing priorities that we don't know about, but they at least can factor those things inside that decision-making process. It will have the benefit to delay building audits, like building energy audits, because those energy audits are super expensive or quite expensive, and they are done every few years, and they basically are a PDF that sits somewhere on an electronic shelf and is usually quickly forgotten, because after a few years it's already out of date. And so finally, we allow to refine the solution. So as you acquire more data about the buildings that you care about, you realize that some of them are actually fine, and some others they need even more attention. So then you start customizing your project list, and you have this business case now that you can go to capital planning with, and you can make a serious pitch about what are the opportunities for those buildings, which brings us to efficiency and impact. So it allows for better capital planning, smarter money, And impact is something we've started to call golden nuggets. And I don't have an image for this, but here's the example of a golden nuggets. So the property managers say we have packaged rooftop units that are gas fired. Half of them will have to be replaced in the next 2-3 years. So they are, let's say, the capital planning discussion. Now the sustainability team will say, hold on, instead of replacing them like for like with a gas-fired solution, the context of your building makes it an ideal candidate to invest $5 million more and use heat pumps instead of regular packaged rooftop units, gas-fired. And so this becomes a golden nugget where you have a project that was already there, and now there's a good business case to just add a little bit more money and then have a huge decarbonization impact and also a big energy efficiency impact. And now this is a very productive conversation, and the sustainability team can also prove that there is a good business case for this because of growing cost of carbon, because of growing energy costs of natural gas, because of a grid decarbonization, like electric grid decarbonization. So this is what a golden nugget looks like, and Audette enables the sustainability team at the asset management firm to dig up those golden nuggets. A few challenges around green tech adoption. I think one of them is market. So here it's more like personal views in here, but I think market concentration is one of them. You make research about HVAC systems and you kind of start building a new technology and you decide to do your startup with that technology where, well, you will be competing against Siemens, Johnson, Trane, Schneider Electric, basically international conglomerates that can acquire your tech with pocket change. So it's not easy. And they also have a kind of a monopoly on distribution of those technologies. So that is a serious challenge. Something I call the engineering ivory tower. Somehow building science is full of jargon and complexity for things that sometimes I don't really think are that complex and that could be simplified a lot. And basically when you sell to the asset managers, they don't care about that complexity. They want to have the very simplified version of that. And so the jargon is useless in those when it's time to get the money to deploy the technology. So unless you find a way to talk about these things in very simple terms, it's going to be a problem. I think it's connected to design. I think there's no more room for bad design of like super clunky machines that are complex to install. To deploy those technologies at scale and at the speed at which we need them to be deployed, it has to be turnkey, extremely fast to do. So there's no room for in like custom one-off solutions. Even if all buildings are different, I think the winning solutions will be the ones that can abstract away the differences between the buildings. Whether it's possible or not is not really the point here. The point is that this is a massive challenge. The unit economics. So as we saw in our presentation, you're talking to people that have a very strict capital planning process in which there's a lot of information silos, and it's actually hard to convince anyone in there to spend money because they're risk averse. So your unit economics of your green technology have to be a no-brainer, like a clear no-brainer. It has to be at least 10x better or 10x cheaper. And it's not because it's good for the planet. Like being good for the planet is not enough. They make money with money, and they care about money. So show them that it's in their best interest to acquire that like perfect green technology. There are other logistical problems, construction labor shortage, a global supply chain that is still not working properly. And the maybe even the idea of the global supply chain is something that could be challenged, and probably that the best decarbonization technologies would be produced locally and efficiently, because the construction market is local also. And there's always the possibility of some energy crisis, because there's crypto and AI that are eating the world's energy, and we see that in places, even in Quebec, where Hydro-Québec a few years ago was saying, oh, we have energy surplus. And suddenly, a couple of years later, now everybody is fighting for the next megawatt, because somehow all the available megawatts evaporated. And in a energy abundant province like Quebec, it's surprising. So I wonder what it looks like in other places where energy is actually scarce. They have started to have like outages in California at peak and things like that. So this is not to be negative, but it's just to be clear that there are big challenges in green tech adoption, but those challenges are also opportunities, because the people that will solve those things will have massive success. And finally, despite, again, all those challenges, the fight against climate change needs you, and probably that if you're working at Sweet, you understand that and you're trying to do your part, which is great. So I encourage you to continue being curious, explore, learn, find your fit, and most of all, never give up. And again, thank you very much for your invitation.
Thanks a lot. That was really interesting, and was a completely different view, I think, on what we do every day. Something that I never really considered. That of course there's people who, of course I know that there's people who care about money, but we too often think only about technology. So thanks a lot for this.